Shalom, welcome to another episode of Inspiration from Zion. I'm Jonathan Feldstein, and I have the privilege of being your host, coming to you from the Judean mountains here in Israel. I like to refer to it as the original Bible Belt. Inspiration from Zion is a program of the Genesis 123 Foundation, whose mission is to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. I pray you'll find this all of those. Through this program, we're excited to connect you to people and stories in and relating to Israel to give you a window to look through, experiencing aspects of life here that you might not otherwise know about. We want this to be interactive, so please be in touch with us at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com or send along any questions and any comments about any topic anytime. Or you can reach us at inspirationfromzion@genesis123foundation at the Genesis 123 Foundation website, genesis123.co, or follow and like Inspiration from Zion on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Stay tuned until the end, where we're going to share an exciting opportunity that we always do, and please feel free to share this with others who will also find it of interest. Not with platitudes, but with true sincerity, today's guest is somebody who I've wanted to have for a conversation, wow, for a very long time, a couple of years, and that's not rhetoric. And every time I think that there's a great topic that he's written about that we have to have a conversation about, he's got another 3 articles that have come out about other topics that we need to have a conversation about. And it's hard to keep pace with Seth Franzman because he has his hand on the pulse of so many things. And I again, not as platitude, but sometimes when I'm reading my Jerusalem Post, I really sometimes think it should be called the Seth Franzman Post, because so many of the articles and so much of the insight about things going on here in Israel and the Middle East are under his byline. Seth is a commentator on current affairs and politics in Israel and a longtime reporter and editor at the Jerusalem Post. He's covered multiple wars in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria, and traveled to Iraq, visiting with Kurdish Peshmerga and the US-led coalition and Iraqi security forces. He has a master's and a PhD from Hebrew University and has lectured at Hebrew University, Bar-Ilan University, and Al-Quds University in American Studies. He's a frequent speaker to diverse groups from around the world and has been published and interviewed equally as widely, including just a few of them: The Forward, Al Jazeera, oh, I can't pronounce the German name, but a German publication, the Moscow Times, the National Review, the Korea Times, and BBC, as well as BBC Persian. And perhaps that's a great segue to talk specifically about our topic today. Today, as we have this conversation, it's February 11th, 2025. Today is I hate using the word anniversary, but I don't have a better word. Seth, you're great with words. Maybe you'll come up with one. The 46th anniversary since the official date of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Something that, by all accounts, all of us, certainly here in Israel, the Middle East, and around the world, should care about, should know about. And so today I'm really excited and grateful, Seth, for you joining, and I'm glad to do my atonement for not having you on a conversation sooner to unpack this conversation as we mark 46 years in a year that's been unprecedented in terms of Iran and its presence and influence in the Middle East. I want to thank you for joining. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I was thinking personally, you were born in the US, I was born in the US, you're here a little bit longer than I. I'd like to just kind of put everyone here, I don't know, we have people certainly from the US, we have one good friend born in Iran, Canadian, I'm trying to figure out French, people who are joining us live. But I remember so vividly the Iranian Revolution, the hostage crisis then, the original hostage crisis, not the one we're living through right now. What are your recollections of that? How did that influence you?
Well, I think that the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979 was it was a bit before I was born. I think I was born the next year, so I certainly don't remember it myself at all. But I do remember when I was a kid. I actually one of my early memories was hearing a radio broadcast about Ollie North, and during the Reagan administration. And I remember bits and pieces about hearing about Iran-Contra and things like that and the Iran-Iraq War. So it was certainly something that I'd heard about. And obviously as I got older, I learned a lot about, the not only the hostage crisis, but the way in which the Iran Islamic regime is interesting because when it came to power, it tried to portray itself as a kind of third way between the United States and the Soviet Union in the Cold War. And what's fascinating is, if we look, it's interesting to remember now because we see how many people are taken in by Hamas propaganda, especially students. And the Islamic Revolution sold itself in the West also as if it was some sort of almost liberal, nice, cuddly rabbit coming to power. And somehow it was going to bring something positive because the Shah was seen in the West, especially among student activists. The Shah was seen as the sine qua non of evil. And so this Islamic Revolution, which was obviously an extremist, populist, fascist type of revolution that was bringing lots of bad things with it, was portrayed as if it was much better than it was. It took a long time, I think, to internalize, like, yeah, this is actually evil and very bad. It's going to spread this all around the region. It's not positive. It's obviously not just anti-American, and America doesn't need to atone for the quote-unquote sins of backing the Shah because this revolution is not great. And but unfortunately, we're still living under the cloud of this problem, I think. And when we see the appeasement for Hamas or appeasement of Iranian proxies, or even the time during the Obama administration when there was kind of a pro-Iran lobby in Washington, that still exists, but I think it's been weakened and broken up a bit. But the Iranian Revolution has a long, deep hold over our policies and consciousness and informs a lot of what still goes on,
Do
whether
you
in Israel or America.
Yeah, definitely. And not just Israel and America, really, really around the world. And you talk about placating, and we see a lot of that. And it's shocking, honestly, that after all these years, we would still see people in any component trying to appease. And maybe you're right that it took a number of years for people to realize that this was not a good revolution, and the dangers and risks were particularly bad. You know history. I'm curious, do you think, of course, the US, part of what triggered the hostage crisis in 1979 was the US giving asylum or protection to the Shah, who was dying from cancer. Do you think that Jimmy Carter, certainly he should have done something different? Do you think he could have done something different in terms of strengthening the Shah, or not perhaps paving the way for the Islamic Revolution?
Well, look, I think in the end of the day, regimes like the Shah's regime, like many regimes we see come and go, they have to do it themselves. America has learned the hard way. You cannot go in and prop something up and build the edifice and do everything. And then the guy at the top is sitting there getting wealthy and his security forces are melting away. Let's remember in 1979, when the Shah's regime suddenly magically collapsed, oddly enough, and no one saw it coming. It was only a few years since America had been propping up a small country in South Vietnam that had cost a heck of a lot of American lives. And the South Vietnamese army disintegrated, I think, in a month or two of fighting in what I think it's called Black April in 75. So imagine in 75, it's only 4 years later, and someone's telling you, well, you know what, we should help these people in Tehran. Look, it would be very difficult to sell that. And I'd say even today, I remember when the Kabul government collapsed in like 2 days after America spent 20 years supporting the Afghans. I mean, and look, I think it's terrible that the Taliban came back to power. It's a disaster, but in the end of the day, we've learned over time you cannot do it yourself. So unfortunately, the Shah's regime messed up, and they should never. It's unfortunate I don't know if it's unfortunate they collapsed. It's unfortunate that what came after them was a total disaster and has harmed Iran and harmed the whole region and maybe harmed the world. But no, I don't know. Jimmy Carter. Look, he made mistakes in terms of this policy. I think of weakening friends and empowering enemies. And that's a policy we see with the Obama administration, I think, as well. So that's obviously the opposite of, let's say, a Reagan or a Trump administration that would say, no, you support your friends. Even JFK said that. We support our friends. We fight our enemies. So I think that that may have given put the wind in the sails of people like the Ayatollah.
Well,
But
very
no,
good point.
we can't do it for them.
No, excellent point, and we'll come back to that because we're about the present and future, but also excellent um, awareness that yeah, Vietnam was just a few years earlier. We think I'm not old enough to really remember that, but so we think of it as ancient history. But if we look at it in that context, absolutely, 100%. And maybe with let's see, we had already had Anwar Sadat come from Egypt. Maybe we had a false perspective that the world, the Arab and Islamic world were taking a turn for the better.
Yeah.
Interesting. We're now 2 generations, solid 2 generations into what we know is a bad regime. We're the threats have grown. I'd love for you to unpack any of that. But I'm wondering, is was we I can't think about how many years back the Prime Minister Netanyahu has been going to the UN with his charts showing that we're this close to a nuclear weapon, we're this close, and talking about it. I know that there's intelligence that maybe all of those were true statements, but because of Israeli subterfuge and actions with Mossad and what have you, that we set back the nuclear plan. But what's your assessment, Seth, about how real the nuclear threat was then and remains now?
Well, look, I mean, nuclear threat is nothing we would ever want to toy with. We don't really want to have more countries with nuclear weapons. I mean, it's dangerous, but we've also seen that, when countries get them, even if the country itself is not a great actor, like Pakistan, I think has proven itself to be a problematic country. It supported anti-Western things. It's been run by sometimes by extremists. It doesn't seem to even control most of its own country, but nevertheless, the nuclear program there has apparently not become a threat to the whole region. In fact, when's the last time you ever heard about it? So, I think the nuclear thing with Iran is the Iranians, like the Pakistanis, like Libya, apparently, like Syria and other countries, had a nuclear program. Iran is a very sophisticated, smart country with lots of human potential. They invested in the program like other countries did. And look, we've all seen the film, or I guess some people have seen that film Oppenheimer. It's not easy to build a nuclear weapon. First of all, you have to enrich all the uranium or the plutonium or whatever you're going to use as the material. I guess you can build a hydrogen bomb as well, but I think as the film says, you need to build a uranium or a plutonium one anyway to trigger it. So you basically have to get all the material. Now in America, when America went to do this, it was a huge amounts of money were invested all over America to do it. It should be recalled that the Germans had a nuclear program prior to during the Second World War, and it was a total disaster. I mean, they never got it off the ground. I think they were playing around with heavy water and stuff, but it was really rudimentary. So you can spend decades working on all this stuff, and you can never get to where you want to get, which is that you need a certain amount of enriched uranium or whatever, some other thing. And then once you have all that, you need to build, well, first of all, you can build something to test it with, like they did, like a bomb, but you've got to build the device. You got to test it. And then you have to build, if you want to use it as a weapons program, as opposed to, I guess, whatever, like nuclear power plants and stuff, you got to build missiles and things to deliver it. Or like the Americans did in the Second World War, you could put it in a bomber, right? The Iranians don't have an air force. I mean, they have planes, but they don't have a real sophisticated. They don't have anything that could drop a bomb. So they use missiles. I think the Iranians have shown that they're willing to sit around and tinker on this, and they use it as a big boogeyman. Whenever they want to, they pull the boogeyman out and they say, there's a nuclear program, you better give us stuff. And the world says, okay, fine, we'll give you stuff. Please stop talking about that. And I would say that the real story of the Iranian threat is, let's go back to the Obama administration again. They basically invested all of their diplomatic resources in the region to the stupid deal. They threw the Syrian rebels under the bus. They threw the Saudis and the Israelis under the bus. All of it for this crazy deal. Now, the Iranians wanted the deal. And let's say, I believe the Iranians, they didn't care about the program that much. They just wanted the deal to get money. And then they used the money to fund all the proxies. And Iran's real goal
Oh,
to take over the Middle East. I mean, in a way, not take over all of it, but either physically take over places using proxies like Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, whatever, or, to use those as like pieces on a chessboard to exert threat and influence to the pieces next door. So Lebanon threatens Israel. Yemen closes the gates in the Red Sea and threatens Saudi Arabia, right? I mean, you can do it. You can go on and on with that. So my sense is with the nuclear program, now the Iranians have lost the Assad regime. Now they're a little bit weakened. They might want to pursue this again up until, they get some appeasement or something. If they ever do get a nuclear bomb, then the whole Iran lobby will run into the Russian and say, well, now you can't be mean to Iran because they might use the bomb. So the funny thing is the boogeyman of the bomb project will be pulled out again, even if they get the bomb. Then the boogeyman will be, well, if you're mean to us, we'll use it. So you'll get in the same stupid vicious cycle of appeasement and paying the regime to then hurt you so you can pay it more.
which is why we can't, no, nobody can allow them to have one.
Yeah, they definitely should not have a bomb. I think the problem is, I think that it is actually difficult maybe at some point to prevent it because, again, going back to the film Oppenheimer or something, once you get all the components together, which they have, the centrifuges, the enrichment, the actual uranium itself that's enriched, then the technology to build the missile, then the technology to build the test device. Once you get it all together in a room somewhere, all they have to do is build, a simple type of a device that will blow up, and then they're a nuclear power, even if they only have a few weapons systems. So I think it might be difficult to prevent it. I mean, it may not. Look, we've seen the Israeli airstrikes on the Houthis in Yemen, right? Okay. Israel carried out a whole bunch of airstrikes there, which everyone, if you read the Israeli media and the foreign media, said this is like a dry run to attack Iran because it's 2,000 kilometers or something. So it's you have to refuel. So it's similar to what you would use in terms of the type of assets and planes and refuelers and things that you'd use to take on Iran. Well, the attacks against the Houthis in Yemen, they didn't stop the Houthi ballistic missile program. They
No.
they damaged a port, which is fine. It's cool for shock and awe, but the Houthi missiles are hiding in caves deep underground. They roll them out and they use them, and they only use one at a time, right? I've never seen
Correct.
the Houthis never use more than one. Well,
Correct.
from an Iranian perspective, if you're the Iranians, you think, well, that's great. All we have to do is build one nuclear device with components,
Oh,
and we can just roll it out. Now, I'm just saying the lessons of the Yemen campaign may not be that great, and it may empower the Iranians. And the Iranians know the Trump administration doesn't want to go to war, so they're going to try to get a bribe again.
interesting. Are you aware, you mentioned all of these components and the things that have to go to be in place. Are you aware if the Iranians have tested a nuclear anything anywhere?
No, and I think that would be detected. The whole point of the American technology to detect things like that, even when the Americans make mistakes and get things wrong, like they didn't know the Pakistanis had such a program that was so close, but once they actually tested it, everyone knew. I think the everyone would know about that. The Iranians might even just do it to tell everyone. Who knows how much? But the big story now, as I understand it from hearing what we hear, is if you go back a few years, the big story was enrichment. Everyone was saying, we don't want the Iranians to enrich more than like 3.75%. And it's like, well, not more than 20%, not more than 50, not more than 80. It never stops. Now, then it became, okay, fine. You have too much enriched material. It's like huge amounts of it. Okay, fine. Now the thing is, okay, let's prevent the other choke point, which is weaponization. If you mentioned Netanyahu's little sketch there when he did the cartoon of the bomb and he had the red line. I mean, I think in terms of the enrichment red line, they kind of have got there. It's a question now of the weaponization program, which is what everyone hears about. Again, I think our experience has been the Iranians keep breaking through the red lines, and then we say, okay, well, let's put that aside. What about this one is the bad problem? And then they go through that one and say, okay, well, what's next. So I guess the concern should be if they do weaponize it and they get to the point of almost testing it, where is that red line? Do we then hear that the red line is the test? I mean, I don't know. I think that's what concerns, I guess, all of us. But I think again, my feeling is with the Iranians. You read, we could read what the president of Iran said just today or something. He gave a speech, I think, where he said, Iran. Most of the messaging from Tehran is that they want to do positive things. They want to do outreach. I saw just now that they said they want to establish balanced relations with all nations. I mean, Iran is trying to pitch itself as a peace partner, and so it's a lot of messaging that is not about a nuclear weapon.
Is that messaging, do you think, because they're trying to cover to perpetuate a fraud and continue to have the West um, appease them, or is there any kind of change because of the changes in the Middle East over the last year?
Well, look, I think there's a few things going on. I think the former president who died in that terrible helicopter crash, tragic,
Terrible in quotes.
just off in fog, along with his foreign minister, who by the way was also an extremist. The foreign minister was a real bad guy, and so was the president. Was quite, they call it a hardliner or whatever. I mean, they're all hardliners in my view, but there's like the bad hardliners and the kind of nicer ones. I think that he was quite bad, but he's gone. The new guy has given lip service to being nicer, although you could see with the direct attacks on Israel that we had last year, there were two attacks on Israel, right? One in
Yes.
I think April, one in October, was it? Yeah. So he's not exactly, he's been willing to do the stuff, but I think the Iranian regime was on a roll from 2015 to 2023 or so. The regime was going wild. They first of all had the proxies in Iraq. They saw ISIS defeated. They won basically in Syria and defeated the rebels. In Lebanon, they basically took over the country and prevented it from having a president. And in Yemen, they fought the Saudis to a standstill and got a deal, right? I mean,
Right.
then the Iranians really got the Chinese to come in and broker a deal with the Saudis so that they could kind of have everything be happy go lucky. Now, they were on this huge roll. And then you get October 7th, and the Iranians are like, okay, switch the button that says get all the proxies to attack Israel and America. And they did. They attacked Israel from Lebanon. They attacked Americans in Iraq and Syria. The Houthis brought global trade in the Red Sea not to a halt, but certainly to a halt if you're a Western or Israeli linked company. This is the strongest they have ever been. And then things began to change a bit. They lost Hezbollah, lost some of it as a proxy. Hamas is weaker. The Houthis, I think, have not been damaged much. The Iraqi militias are weakened a bit, not by their own fault, not anything Israel America did. That the Iraqi militias kind of just shot their bolt a bit. And the Assad regime totally collapsed under the pounding of this group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and which was benefited by Israel's weakening of Hezbollah. So suddenly the Iranians, I think, they're a bit on the back foot, and then it behooves them then to switch from feeling this pride of and all these threats that they had to being okay. Well, let's dial it back and let's talk diplomacy. Let's do work with the Russians and the Chinese. Let's have dinner with the people from Oman. Let's do politics, foreign policy. So I feel that the president there, what we see a lot is foreign policy now, and they can keep all the bad things they do, in reserve, and then they just turn it back on when they want, I think.
But so not you don't have any sense that there's a change of heart, just a change of strategy.
Well, there is a change of heart because the Biden administration is gone, the Trump administration is back, and the Iranian regime is not these people. The Iranian regime is not stupid. If there's one thing you can say about them, unlike ISIS but even unlike people that are a bit, sometimes seem a bit unbalanced, like the Turkish president Erdogan, who makes these crazy speeches and stuff. I mean, he seems to zigzag a bit. The Iranian regime is an extremely smart, sophisticated regime. And as I said, with a lot of smart human material behind it, these are very smart people. They should not be underestimated. So, right, I would say they understand the Trump administration is not to be trifled with. And they would like to probably, look, I think they'd like to find a way to get the Trump administration to buy into some sort of a deal, and they don't want to provoke the Trump administration. So they're playing very smart. And that could be good for the region because if they tone everything down and stop attacking American ships like they used to and kidnapping sailors like they used to and doing all sorts of bad things or attacking American troops in Iraq, they know what happens there. If you kill Americans in Iraq, Trump will kill you because that's what he did to Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi Mohandes, who was the Iraqi militia leader who happened to be in the car with Soleimani and also died. So if you mess with the Americans now, Trump and Hegseth and these people will come and kill you.
Okay.
And they're not, and the Iranians are not stupid. They understand what they're dealing with. I think they get it.
Let me ask your input on something I saw last week. It feels like it was ages ago. The day that Trump and Netanyahu had their meetings and press conference and dropped the bombshell of the US taking over Gaza and moving out however many millions of Gazans from Gaza. Prior to that, just a couple of hours, Trump signed an executive order to restore maximum pressure, and it was pretty substantial. But I happened to be watching it live as he was sitting, I think, in the I assume in the Oval Office, and making all these comments about he really didn't want to. He felt that he was getting pressure, and there's some people who were pushing him to do this, but he would really like to have another deal. He kept talking about that. What was your take on that?
Well, I think he was signaling. I mean, I think that Trump is a smart guy, and he understands. I mean, he wrote a book called The Art of the Deal, so he at least he thinks he understands this. I think he's shown historically he's quite good at it. I mean, at least, and his people are. When he tasks people like Steve Witkoff to go out and get a deal done, they get it done. So Trump is that's his mentality, and I think, in deal making, sometimes you set a certain demand up here because what you want is here, and you say, okay. So with Iran, you say, okay, we're going to put on some sanctions or whatever, and the whole point of sanctions then is you get rid of them. But they do X and Y, and then you go back. So I assume that's what he says. I think the hint that he's being pressured on this is something that's also very real in the Trump camp, which is have you I'm sure seen, and our listeners I assume is the Trump team today is not Trump administration number one. People like Brian Hook, Pompeo, Haley, a bunch of other people have been put aside, and a lot of those people were, I guess they would call Iran hawks, like Bolton. And Trump's been very tough on these people, as you know.
Yeah,
He said negative things about them, and the Trump milieu of people that are Trump, let's say, influencers or channeling Trump online, they've said these people are bad. And there's been a lot of talk I've seen online by people on the right or conservative circles, whatever you want to call them, like Tucker Carlson, saying we need to, Iran is not the enemy. We're being pushed to war with them. And sometimes there's stuff here about Israel where they say, Israel's trying to drag us into that or whatever. But there's certainly I get a sense that the new Trump administration is more reticent on the Iranian issue. They don't want to be seen to be pushed into conflict. They don't want American boots on the ground. They have brought people in to different parts of the federal government, appointees that are people that are more in the camp of, I think it's like Elbridge Colby type of people that are more into the camp of, we need to focus on China, not Iran. China, not Russia. China, China. So there's a different strategy here.
different strategy. Does that mean would you assess that the US would participate in any military campaign to eliminate with Israel on its own to eliminate the nuclear facilities?
I don't, I'd be doubtful. I mean, I don't know. I would be doubtful on it, but I think the question there you asked is predicated on Israel doing it too, and I don't think Israel wants to really do it, to be honest. I mean, as I
Why
said,
is that?
well, I just think it's a very difficult campaign, and if you screw it up, then you don't have a second chance, right? Let's say, for instance, you give the go order, and the planes fly over there and bomb a bunch of stuff, and it doesn't work. You don't get deep enough. You don't destroy the stuff you want. Then the Iranians declare victory the next day, and they say that they've won. And it looks and you, let's say, in a sense, Israel, let's say that's if that was who carried out the operation, looks a lot weaker the next day, rather than being able to hold over around that threat of strikes. So it's like the Houthi problem that I presented before. Once you start carrying out the strikes, if the enemy doesn't change, then you have not deterred them. So if you're going to carry out the strikes, they better work. And I think that's where you get run into the problem, I'm sure, of saying, well, how do you do it? Iran has a whole bunch of nuclear facilities, a whole bunch of they keep building things underground. They want it. They've done this purposely to make it difficult to get at them. So again, that's where you run into. Does Israel want us to, engage in a multi-month, multi-year campaign? I mean, and again, each time you do it, you risk things going wrong. A plane goes down, people get taken hostage. Imagine that would be a disaster. So those are the types of questions I assume that are asked in when these discussions come up. And obviously the preference would be to not have them have a nuclear program that says and not have them proceed.
You speak to a lot of interesting people, and in the context of your reporting, do you have a sense if Israel has the capability to take out their nuclear facilities?
I think Israel has probably the capabilities. I mean, it may not all be what we think it is. I mean, in the sense that you don't always have to drop a giant bomb. I mean, as you mentioned before, I think it was did you mention the Stuxnet or other things that were done over the years to destroy the program without having to do anything to it, which is to get centrifuges to go too fast and destroy themselves. So there's all sorts of capabilities out there. I assume that I think Israel's defense doctrine, I mean, part of the reason, by the way, Israel was vulnerable October 7th and didn't expect a human wave attack is because the country was spending 90% of its, defense focus, let's say, or resources, whatever you want to call it, on focusing on Hezbollah and the Iranian traffic in Syria and Iran itself, what Israel calls a third circle threat. And Israel even established a whole third circle directorate, I think, in the IDF or defense establishment with a general in charge just to deal with Iran. So, Israel shifted a lot of resources toward that, and that's taking it very seriously and giving lots of thought to it. And again, unfortunately, that meant less resources for things like infantry brigades and tank battalions to fight Hamas.
There's a lot of, thank you for that. There's a lot of awareness that our Israel's last attack on Iranian facilities in, I suppose it was October still, I don't remember, but weeks after they sent us to the bomb shelters again in the middle of the night, took out a lot of the air defense systems, and many Iranians were mocking their, I think, what did they kill? They killed some chickens from their attack on us, but there was not really any significant damage. But Iran's a mess domestically. The economy, it's understood that 10 millions or tens of millions of Iranians don't like their regime, don't want the regime. To what extent, you're raising a great question, rhetorical, that we don't have an answer to, about whether Israel could or should engage militarily and what the risks would be, and specifically of not taking out the nuclear program. But what about the continued weakening of the Islamic regime itself as a way to empower Iranians, which, and you said this in a different context, but we can't do it for them. The Iranians have to take back their own country. Is that a justifiable, is it a potential, and is it justifiable in terms of a military action?
In terms of military action or in terms of what they do themselves?
In terms of us triggering something, whether or not we get all of the nuclear facilities, and they might claim that we didn't get them all, so they still are successful. But if we hit them hard enough, would and could it trigger the Iranian people to finally have that uprising without an Obama in the Oval Office appeasing and basically throwing cold water on the Iranian uprising?
Right. I mean, that's always the $1 million question, I guess, is would Israel, I think in the strikes in October, they were not a big spectacle. It wasn't shock and awe. I mean, Israel didn't carry out bombing in downtown Tehran. I mean, which you would say, what if Israel had hit some symbols of the regime? Would that cause people to say, oh, the regime's a paper tiger, let's take it down? But I think there's always a risk there, and I assume history shows that, which is when a country is weak on the inside or perceived as weak, if you attack it, sometimes the country rallies together. And I don't remember which war it was that someone said, I don't know if it was the Hitler talking about the Soviet Union or something. He said that, it would be like kicking in a rotting door to destroy it. Well, yeah, the Operation Barbarossa didn't destroy the Soviet Union. The Soviets lost like 20 million people and defeated the Nazis, and the Soviets were not popular when it started. So sometimes when I guess what I'm saying is sometimes when you attack, you actually cause what looks like kind of a weak, teetering regime to come together. So it could be that would cause Iran to come together, and then let's say, therefore, you should do nothing, and the regime could fall by itself. You never know when regimes will fall. It's like if you were there in the Berlin Wall before it fell, you would say, "Oh, this will be here for decades," and then all of a sudden it falls. So it could be that the regime suddenly collapses because of something that they did. Like, remember when they killed that woman, Masajina?
Masa,
Right.
Masa,
So you never know where something little, like what happened in Tunisia with the Arab Spring, some tiny, what seems little, becomes a huge thing. I think it's very hard to know, and human history teaches us that you can never. There's no secret sauce for overthrowing regimes or something. Otherwise, I assume hopefully the regime should have been overthrown a while ago, and it hasn't. It's like that regime in Cuba where you say, "Well, how could people possibly accept to live under that ossifying post-Castro disaster that is Cuba?" And yet it doesn't fall apart. You know.
no, it doesn't. It's a good analogy. So I was going to ask you the question, and you said it, but I think you answered it. What's the secret sauce? How to defeat the regime? But you're saying, if I'm going to put words in your mouth and then you can respond. Maybe it could be through a military. If it's not going to be Israel, it's not going to be the US boots on the ground. It has to be the Iranian people, but it could be triggered over something that we don't have any part in.
Well, that would be the preference, I think. Then the other question is what happens, because look, again, the regime is not stupid in Iran. They're very smart. They never suppress the people too much, right? What's that saying? You don't want to be hated by too many people. So they try to manage the situation, and I think the regime understands. If I know, I don't know enough about Iran, but let's say what I think, or what I feel to know is that a lot of the people in Tehran, let's say people that are upper middle class, the regime knows that the upper middle class, let's say you could call some of them elites, detest the regime, and all the women, want to dress how they want, and everyone's pretty more liberal than they are, and they like America and they like Israel. That they know that these people don't accept them, but they understand that those people are balanced by the fact that in the rest of the regions of Iran, you have a bunch of poorer regions with minority groups like Arabs, Kurds, Azeris, Baluch, all these different groups, which I think if you add them all up, maybe actually a majority of the people in Iran or something. But that somehow it all balances itself because all the minority groups also don't like the regime, but somehow the regime is able to feed off that and survive. And they also know that the opposition abroad is divided between the different groups that are kind of well known within the opposition don't get along with each other without having to name names, but they just don't. So the regime kind of sits back and says, "That's fine. You guys don't. None of you guys really get along with each other. We'll just sit and keep feeding off this."
Good observation. Let's come back to the proxies. I think correctly said that the Houthis have not really been hurt that hard. Today, they've threatened that if we continue with the war, they're going to continue firing. And I love this very simple observation you made that they only fire one missile at a time. They're not doing hundreds, and that sends millions of us in the middle of the night to our bomb shelters, and then we're grumpy and tired and angry the next day. But clearly, the Iranians have funded and armed all of them. And the question is, if we don't take out, if the regime is continued to be in power, like an octopus, you can cut off its tentacles, but it can regenerate its tentacles. Is there another solution? to either to cutting off the head of the octopus or to an actual death blow for the tentacles?
I mean, one of the problems I think we have had in the region is that Iran's regime is an octopus, and it's an octopus whose tentacles primarily feed off Shiite groups. Or in the case of the Houthis, I don't know. Again, I don't know enough about the religious aspect there. I understand that they are their own thing. It's a different religious group or something. So they're not exactly Shiites, but they somehow have connections somehow to that. So Iran feeds off those groups. And when it doesn't feed off them, it creates weird proxies like Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is a proxy group. It's not very big, but it's very dangerous. And then it works with Hamas, which is obviously Sunnis, a Muslim Brotherhood, Ikhwan, but they are able to get in there because actually the IRGC and the Muslim Brotherhood probably have many things not only in common, but they may even be connections there with the Turkey somehow, and with Qatar. Iran and Qatar are kind of friends. I mean, after all, the Hamas leaders live in Qatar and then they fly back and forth to Iran. They were just there this week, so not great. The proxies. I think the thing about proxies, and when I started my answer, I would say the people that are let's say the victims of the proxies are the we. So Israel, Saudi Arabia, Kurds in Iraq, the victims, other people in Iraq, or the Sunnis in Iraq are victims as well. So we're all the victims of the proxies. Now, the victims are not all on the same side exactly, because even though we share interests, Israel and Saudi Arabia don't have. I mean, we don't have official relations, even if we talk or whatever. I mean, it's not all simple. We are not one big club, so we can't stand up to the proxies as a group. Each victim fights his own little lonely war against the proxy by himself, which is how Iran likes it. They divide our camp, and we fight a bunch of little wars against them. The problem we face is our side is not as well run as their side often. I don't mean Israel. Of course, Israel is a very well run country. So is Saudi Arabia. But Lebanon, the Sunnis or whoever you want to say are the non-Hezbollah people, like some of the Christians, the Christians in Lebanon have been divided into different camps. The ones that work with Hezbollah and the ones that don't like them. So that's how Iran wins. They divide and weaken and hollow you out and bankrupt you and destroy you from within. And then they get you to fight each other. They did the same thing with the Kurds. They get the PUK to be against the KDP. And in 2017, when the Iraqi government went into Kirkuk, the Iranians got a deal there and weakened the Kurds from within. So that's what the proxies do. The problem we have, us, the victims, is that we do not have proxies of our own. And the best way to fight proxies is to get other proxies to fight them. I mean, by the way, that's how the Americans defeated the Soviets in Afghanistan, right? As far as I know, not one American died fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan. I could be wrong. Someone can check it. But I speak as an American for a second, we didn't go into Afghanistan with troops. We got a bunch of other people, like the Pakistanis and the Saudis and other people, Egyptians, to create a proxy war with the Mujahideen to defeat the Soviets. If you want to fight proxies, you've got to get other proxies to do it. So unfortunately, we don't have proxies in Yemen. I mean, the Saudis backed the Yemen government against the Houthis, and that didn't work very well. The Lebanese are divided, and apparently are not willing to totally get rid of Hezbollah. In Iraq, the Kurds are strong in the north, but the PMU or Hajj al-Shabi, what they call it, which is the group of proxies. Sometimes they also call themselves the Islamic Resistance or whatever. But our side in Iraq is not able to defeat them because the Kurds are not going to go to Baghdad. The Kurds just want their own region. So, and you could say, well, the Sunnis are on our side. Yeah, but the Sunnis, we've seen what happened. It doesn't work out very well so far. Now, the only example where our side, let's say, we could say our side won, is in Syria, where again, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which people would say, well, how can you describe them as a positive force? It's previously a jihadist Al-Qaeda organization. Because when I'm saying our side, as I said, we're not all exactly the same, but the Syrian people are victims of Hezbollah, and they're victims of Iran. So in a sense, that is the one success story. And again, it proves my point. In a sense, I'm not saying that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is a proxy, But if you want to defeat the proxy, it has to be the people that does it. And Hayat Tahrir al-Sham just totally swept away these Iranian proxies in like 24 hours of fighting or something in early December. So that's a miracle. I mean, in a sense of how to get rid of them. Maybe other countries can learn from that, or we, in a sense, who are the groups that don't oppose the proxies, could learn from it.
Do you think when you were speaking before, Obama's name's come up a few times. He certainly didn't help in any substantial way to weaken or create any kind of peace with Iran. And it's, I think, conventional wisdom that because of that Iran deal, his legacy was pushing Israel and the Saudis closer together, and that's why we can fly to Dubai and Thailand over Saudi space, and that's why there have been public meetings and declarations, albeit somewhat recently fraught with tension, especially over Trump's remarks. Do you see any? Clearly, it would be I think, in the Saudis' interests to have a much more formal public alliance with Israel. Do you see that any way being less intractable now or more likely?
I mean, it's always likely that could happen, and the Trump administration could pave the way. I think the Saudis have been very, 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 very public that they want to get something in return. And the Saudis, look, the Saudis are in a very different position than Bahrain or Morocco or the UAE. The Saudis historically view themselves and have been a leader of the Islamic world. And they are where Mecca is and the Islamic sites that they are host of pilgrims. So Saudi Arabia is not just a place. It's not Malaysia. It's not Indonesia. It's something else. It's beyond. And I think, therefore, the king, himself and his son, the crown prince, but let's say they speak about the king for a second, he's a steward of that and understands the legacy of that. And I think he would not want to, in a sense, give away normalization and not be seen to get much in return, because it would present the Saudis as letting down the Islamic world, maybe, or not getting enough. And look, this is a world that honor and pride matter, and all these things in this region, especially. So again, that's why the Saudis, by the way, as far as I understand it, before the Abraham Accords happened, and when it was kind of whatever behind the scenes or whatever, I understand the Bahrainis and, well, UAE especially, who's very close. The UAE is very close to Saudi Arabia, and MBS, the crown prince there, is very close to MBZ, one of the leaders in the UAE. I understand that the Bahrainis basically went to the Saudis and said, "Well, can we make peace with Israel? What do you think?" And the Saudis said, "Yeah, that's okay with us, but let's get the UAE on board as well, because you, Bahrain, are kind of a small country with a Shiite majority population. We don't want to rock the boat too much. Let's get the UAE, which is a sophisticated, powerful country and has a lot of similarities to Israel in terms of high tech and connections. Let's bring you guys together. You'll do it together, and we'll give you guys the green light quietly on the side." And I think that's kind of how it happened. And so that's, that the Saudis already kind of paved the way through that. But it's a lesson that I'm sure the Saudis have looked at the Abraham Accords now and said, okay, well, did this work out? Did our friends get what they wanted out of this? And the Saudis would be right to say, or to criticize and say, listen, we don't think we're getting enough on our side, which is, we'd like some lip service to a Palestinian state. We'd like the Israeli government to be less hard right, and so they would like things as well. And that's, like, I assume that's kind of where the question is. And there's one more part of this, I think, which is there's something called the Saudi or Arab, was it the Arab League, the Peace Initiative back in 2001 or so?
2002, yeah.
Right. So remember, they trotted that out, and that was very important for them, because they basically said Israel will get peace if you guys go back to the 67 lines.
Full normalization with the whole Arab League. It wasn't just
that was very important for
Saudis.
them.
Yeah.
So once they were on the record as putting that out there, I feel like they are within that paradigm, and to kind of chuck that out the window, I think they would not want to do that. And my understanding also in general and how the Gulf works is they're willing to wait. I mean, they don't see a need to run. They're willing to wait, and they're willing to have the processes play themselves out.
Interesting. I want to begin to, first of all, thank you. This is so super enlightening, and you're really making me regret that I haven't had this conversation with you here previously, Seth. So I'm really grateful. I want to invite people who are following live to use the Q&A for any questions, and I want to begin to include some of those. And Paul, you've asked a few really good questions. I think Seth answered in terms of the relationship with Qatar's relationship with Iran, but I want to preface the questions that you're asking regarding Egypt. Years ago, 2008, I think, I befriended an Egyptian diplomat here in Israel who shared with me, I had never thought of it, but he shared with me that Egypt hated Iran because Iran was ultimately responsible for the assassination of President Sadat in 1981. And Iran, which ties into the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamic extremism in general. So the question that Paul's asking is what's the relationship with Egypt and more contemporary in terms of our it's a digression, but it's a worthwhile question. With our peace, with Israel's peace with Egypt, was it a smokescreen considering all the weapons that have come through the Egyptian border, presumably from Iran and other proxies over the last 40 years and more recent years in specific?
Well, it's a super complicated question. I think the answer is I don't know all the answer. I'd say let's shine little bits of light on it. Egypt invaded Gaza in 48, right, during the war, and they then ran Gaza until 67. So the Egyptians view Gaza, as a kind of connected to them in a sense, colonialistically, or they have all sorts of connections there. So they kind of view themselves as stewards relating to Gaza, which makes sense. Now, you get to the agreement and the Egyptian peace deal, and then the killing of Sadat, and the Muslim Brotherhood is obviously disliked by the Egyptian regime and government. But Egypt has always been willing to kind of play both sides and allow problems to fester in one place so that the regime itself can survive. Then you have the fact that the Egyptian government is overthrown or changed in the Arab Spring, and the Muslim Brotherhood comes to power briefly for like a year. During that year, all the weapons, remember, were flowing not just from Iran, and all these weapons in the fall of the Gaddafi regime were flowing into Sinai. And remember, there was an Islamic State, or first it was an Al Qaeda affiliate, then Islamic State in Sinai.
Right.
That was a huge bloodbath for the Egyptian security forces, and they remember that. And I think Sisi came to power after that to crack down on all the disasters that were happening. And for a while, he was able to crack down on the Muslim Brotherhood, and I think he was able to help with the Gaza issue. But I think they always allowed a little bit of things to pass in Sinai that they didn't do too much about, because they kind of prefer that the problem would be pushed over into Israel and therefore not boomerang back on them. And I think the lead up to October 7th raises some serious problems because the Egyptians are supposed to have pretty good intelligence. They know a lot about Gaza. How did they not pick up on this and warn the Israelis? And I think that's a lot. I think there's questions about whether or not the Egyptians were doing enough, to not have Hamas become the monster that it is. And I think the evidence shows they didn't do enough. And Egypt has not been helpful enough in this respect. And that maybe because the Sisi government has chosen to reconcile with Ankara and reconcile with the Qataris. And maybe there's some sort of quiet deal behind the curtain, which is that they say, okay, the Qataris and Ankara won't support the MB in Egypt, but we'll turn a blind eye a bit to what they do in Gaza. And look, remember, the Egyptians are also fighting in Libya or supporting the Haftar government. So, or whatever the Haftar thing is. So they have lots of pies to play in, and I think they're willing sometimes to play a bit of both sides.
Wow. That's a huge answer. Thank you. I want to just offer if anyone has any other questions, and Marzi, I'm not clear if you want to join us and are able to close out in prayer. If I'm not even sure if you're hearing from the beginning, but we would love to have that. You can all please indicate by the Q&A. Seth, before we wrap up, it's a broad topic. Here we are, literally 46 years to the day. I'm eager to go read what you wrote in the Jerusalem Post today, and I'll share that with everybody who's registered. Is there anything that you think that we missed, that we didn't talk about in terms of a little bit of the history, but certainly looking forward vis-a-vis Iran?
Looking forward. Well, look, I think it's important to understand Iran is at a crux in let's say, the world in terms of the new world order. I guess you'd call it the new world order, which is that Iran is positioning itself with Russia and China to be part of the post-American, hegemony, and they want to be involved not just with that, but with the economic part of that, which is the BRICS and the SCO, which are these organizations that bring together, China, Russia, and other countries, sometimes India, sometimes Brazil, South Africa, et cetera, et cetera. So Iran is very much trying to ride that tide, and they want to disentangle themselves from the West and unplug from the West. And the processes are all in place to do that. So that's kind of where we are. And it's worth thinking about Iran in terms of that global strategy, which I think is important, and not forget that's what Iran is thinking about.
Thank you, Seth. I'm grateful. I want to introduce you to my friend who's going to close out. But I promise that I think I've been doing this podcast for 4 years. I promise it will not be another 4 years before I invite you to join me. This was even more dynamic than I anticipated, and everything I say, I I can tell that it's a Seth Franzman article just by reading the headline because I know that that's got your fingerprints on it. And I mean that in a really positive way. So thank you for that. And I also thank you for being busy 2 years ago when I tried to introduce you to a friend, a woman who's become a really good friend, Marzi Amirizadeh. Marzi, you need to unmute yourself, please. She had been coming here to visit Israel for the very first time. And I was trying to help her, even though I had never even met her, try to set up some media. And I thought you would be the perfect person to interview her. And since you were busy that week, I ended up getting to write the article, which has been a great foundation of our friendship and our partnership with the Root and Branch Project and so many other things. So Seth, thank you for being busy that week in April of 2023. And I'm pleased to introduce you to my friend Marzi, who spent an unfortunate 9 months in Iranian prison, having been arrested and sentenced to death for converting to Christianity. And as much as you have such a breadth of knowledge, Seth, Marzi has most of her life experience in Iran. Marzi, I'd love for you to close with any comments and then certainly in prayer.
Hi, Jonathan. Hi, Seth. It's a great honor to meet you and to listen to you and hear your opinion about Iran. And I know it's because of time, it's not a time for big discussion. I wish we could sit together and talk about each topic. It's a lot of things that you shared. That was amazing to hear that. But I want to just say a few sentences and then just do the prayer. But I'm looking forward to meeting you in person, even though this didn't happen, Jonathan mentioned, but I would love to talk to you more about this topic. I just wanted to say that, Jonathan knows me, that I'm not very professional in politics and this kind of things. All my opinion comes from my faith and my personal experience. And for 33 years, I lived in Iran, and I know that it's very important to get to know the enemy, who they are, what is their goal, what is their agenda, what is their ideology. And I grew up with all those things, and that's why I can say I'm expert regarding knowing my enemy. And all things that I share is based on my experience living in Iran, being in prison, dealing with these evil people. But a few points about not everything. It's a lot of topics to talk about, but I just wanted to mention about a few points that you shared. That these people regarding achieving nuclear bomb, definitely this is their goal to achieve that. Because I know the nature of these people, and their nature is evil. And it's not just me saying, if you ask, a lot of Iranians know that, and that they are living under this evil regime. And it's not just for the purpose of achieving bribe or appeasement for Western leaders to get them to appease them. They have an agenda, and their goal is to annihilate the state of Israel. And that's real, because when they do these teachings from a very young age, so what is the purpose of brainwashing children with anti-Semitism and talking about against Israel? Another thing that you mentioned is about opposition. That recently I wrote an article that you mentioned, unfortunately, oppositions are divided. At the beginning, I was thinking the same, that unfortunately, oppositions are divided, but understanding the opposition is very important. There are different kinds of oppositions outside Iran, like MKs, who they were the ones that supported the Islamic Republic regime to come to power. Ayatollahs could not come to power with their own power. They were the ones that helped them. And there are other oppositions who are fake opposition. They are trained and they are agents of the regime. They are part of reformists inside Iran. That's why Iranians cannot be united with these people. And if you wanted to say if Iranian people, oppositions are united, I can say yes. If you look at the protests inside Iran, and if Western people, Western leaders listen to the voice of Iranian people, they are calling and they are saying what they want. But unfortunately, Western leaders do not want to hear the voice of people. By standing by fake oppositions and supporting them, bolding them, that creates division. Otherwise, Iranian people know what they want, know who they are, they want to come back. And that's the purpose of actually a tactic of the Islamic Republic regime, to that way to create division among Iranian people. And about their own tactic inside the country, I always say that there are two groups, hardliner and the reformists, and their tactic is like playing bad guy and good guy. And they suppress people, they kill people, murder people, and put lots of pressure on people. And then reformists come in and they play like oxygen to the regime. So that's the problem. And I always say that how much reformists are more dangerous than the hardliners. And about some oppositions outside Iran, like the Kurds, I know their own goal is to have their independent country. They are fighting to have an independent country, and many of them sided by the regime and supported the regime at different times. And if it comes to their benefit, if even the Islamic Republic regime helps them to achieve their goal, they will support the regime. And it's not about getting rid of this evil regime inside Iran. So that's a few points that I wanted to mention, and I wanted to always refer to the story of King David in Bible, and I wrote an article about that. And I think King David, besides his amazing faith that he went against the giant Goliath, that Palestine had a big army, and they were bragging, and everyone was scared of that. But one good point about him, he knew his enemy and he knew where to target. And I always say we need to target the supreme leader of Iran. If we target the supreme leader of Iran and a few key leaders in Iran and take them out, that brings a big hope in the Iranian people to raise up. We don't need to destroy or go to military war or destroy anything right now. But with this, I believe if we target that, because they resonate to people that Ayatollah, the supreme leader of Iran, is immortal and no one can take him out. And we need to take him out to raise hope in Iranian people. Thank you so much for allowing me. I know I should not talk that much. But let me to pray. I wrote a prayer for Iranian people, and I read it. I pray that the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob change the hearts and minds of the Ayatollahs in Iran to repent. I pray for the leaders of Iran to stop murdering, torturing, and suppressing innocent Iranian people. I pray that the evil Islamic regime stop spreading hate, anti-Semitism, and stop plotting against God's chosen people through their terrorist proxies. I pray for God's wrath and judgment against the evil rulers of Iran if they do not repent. Dear Father, I pray that you punish and destroy Iranian authorities that seek evil plans. Please show no mercy to the traitors and put them to shame and disgrace. I pray that the leaders of the world stand with Israel and Iranian people and stop appeasing the evil regime in Iran. I pray for President Trump's protection from the evil ayatollahs in Iran. I pray for him to be surrounded with wise advisors to continue his punitive policies against the Islamic regime and stand with Israel and Iranian people. Dear Father, I pray that you deliver Iranian people from this savage enemy and break their chains of captivity. Please lead the Iranian people to rise up and make them bold and courageous to stand and fight for their freedom. Please lead the Iranian women who have been suppressed and disrespected under the harsh rules of Islam to rise up. Father, I pray that you show your justice and love to Iranian people who have been suffering under the rules of ayatollahs for so many years. Let Iranian people know that you have not abandoned them. Let them repent from their sins and stop following the false god Allah blindly. Let them know that Jesus Christ is their only and true Savior. Let Iranian people rejoice in you and celebrate their victory and freedom in near future. Father, please put an end to the sufferings of Israeli people and the hostages. Please destroy Hamas terrorists and their godfather, the Islamic Republic regime. Please stop such barbaric and inhuman behaviors against your chosen people through their enemies. Dear Father, let Iranian and Israeli people who are fighting against a common enemy and are suffering because of the evil Islamic regime stand together, be united, and restore their friendship again. I pray all these in the name of my God and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Margie, thank you. Seth,
Thank you.
thank you so much. We're going to wrap this up just with the traditional announcements. If anyone's following for the first time, please pay attention. If you're following every week, then fabulous, then you know the routine. As we always do and have done from almost the beginning, Genesis 123 Foundation wants to thank you for following inspiration from Zion and being part of this conversation. We want to offer you a special gift. Every month for the last 2-3 years, we've been offering a special gift. I call it From Jonathan's Bookshelf. And for the last year and a half, that book has been our book, the published fantastic book called Israel the Miracle. It's a compilation of 75 essays by Christian leaders from all over the world, presented as a coffee table book, which is as stunning as it is inspiring. So all we ask that you do is comment, like, or share the link to this broadcast wherever you're watching it, and we're going to pick one person at random to receive a copy each month. We're always grateful that the podcast is sponsored by our friends at the Willow Run Greenhouse in Culpeper, Virginia. If you're ever in the area, please pop in and say thank you and help for helping make conversations like this possible. And also special thanks to the Coin family as well for their meaningful sponsorship. Inspiration from Zion and all of the Genesis 123 Foundation programs are made possible by donations. So please consider joining us to help continue build bridges. If you'd like to sponsor an episode in honor or memory of a loved one or special occasion, or your favorite journalist at the Jerusalem Post, please be in touch at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com. We'd always love to hear your comments as well as part of a dialogue, and invite you to send your questions about anything at any time, and specifically about traditional Judaism for our Ask the Rabbi programs. Wherever you are in the world, I pray that you and your loved ones are all safe and healthy, and I send my blessings from right here in the Judean mountains. God bless you.